Kazakhstan and other developing countries need to focus on developing human capital to meet the future challenges of globalization and automation, said Bronwyn Williams, an economist and UNDP Futures Fellow from Johannesburg. Williams highlighted that technologies like AI will boost productivity but may also widen inequality within professions and between countries. For resource-rich nations like Kazakhstan and South Africa, investing in human capital and renewable energy is key to staying competitive in the future. Last week, Williams visited Kazakhstan to attend Connected 2024, an international conference where experts from around the world explore the future of society. Here's a fragment from the interview.
Considering your expertise, I can't help but ask you about the countries such as Kazakhstan, for example. So my question is, what factors do you think will determine the Kazakhstan's economic growth or economic future also in the coming, as you said, middle-term period?
Yeah, I think the most important thing countries, particularly like a middle-income developing countries and economies, need to get right is to invest properly in their human capital. So human capital is becoming an increasingly important commodity. It's one of the only things that is scarce enough that no amount of technology is going to be able to improve. If we don't have more people, technology is not going to make more people, at least not within the next 10 to 15 years. Looking far into the future, maybe we'll be able to engineer babies in labs, but we're not there yet. And that means if you have a declining population, you're going to have some challenges. And I know that many parts of the world, like where you're from, that's becoming an issue. If you have less humans, you have less human capital. But also then we also have to make sure that the quality of that human capital is able to keep up with the advances of the twin threats and opportunities of globalization and automation. And in order to invest in your human capital, you have to get two things right. Firstly, you need a healthy, fit population. We're talking about from feeding babies to make sure they grow up to their full potential, and also, of course, looking after the health of your older segments of your population so that they can be working for longer, so that they can be contributing independent members of society rather than dependent old age members of society, which becomes a really big threat. So you have to have a healthy population from the young to the old, and then you have to make sure they are equipped with the skills and the knowledge. I hesitate to use the word education because that's going to become something we're going to have to unpick as a species going forward, but you have to have the skills and the access to information to capitalize on those two things that I said, globalization and automation, that could either accelerate your advance and your competitive advantage or leave you behind.
Let me ask you this. As you might know, Kazakhstan took responsibility to move towards greener future.
Yes.
So how do you see, what impact will the development of these new technologies, such as renewable energy sources, will have on the economy of Kazakhstan, considering the fact that we are actually now highly dependent on resources like oil and gas?
Well, countries like individuals need to find a way to have a competitive advantage where you can both add value to the global economy and also be valued for your contribution. So if you do come from a resource-heavy nation like yourself, and I come from South Africa, we have a very similar challenge and opportunity there. Sure, that's great. That's something that is valuable, but it might become less valuable to the rest of the world going forward. So the way to do that is to shift your sort of national mindset around what that competitive advantage really is. And here I can use an example from the world of business. Certain car manufacturers have seen the future, seen how societies are shifting, how cities are being built differently, and they've seen that perhaps the future is not petrol-based combustion engine cars, but they do have an infrastructure and a competitive advantage in the greater value proposition that they are offering to people in the idea of mobility, right? So if you shift your perspective from being a maker of cars to being a producer of mobility solutions, suddenly new technologies are no longer a threat, they're now an opportunity. So if you are a resource-heavy country that already has a reputation as being a producer and exporter of energy, you can look beyond just coal and gas and oil towards what are the future energies too, and become a competitive player in that greater space. So you have to kind of find out what the underlying value it is that you are offering to the world, rather than focusing on the current way that you are delivering that value, if that makes sense.
To resume all that we discussed, can we say like 3 steps for economies like Kazakhstan for the sustainable future?
Yeah, I think the first one is probably the hardest one, particularly again as a developing country in an unfair, unequal world. The one thing that we have to guard against is protectionism and nationalism at this particular juncture. We have to be open to embracing new technologies, which are by definition borderless. And we also have to be brave enough to still connect ourselves to the global economy. Again, as developing middle income countries, we are required to get some of that capital back that has sort of, filtered and pooled in other parts of the world. And the only way to do that is by embracing trade and openness. So we have to have sort of open economic policies in terms of trade, in terms of human capital migration too, and in terms of capital migration. So I think that's something that feels counterintuitive, but actually becomes one of those key indicators for future growth, openness to trade. And I would suggest particularly with other middle income countries, because we can help each other grow in different parts of the world. I've already mentioned making sure you're investing in your human capital. Where you can, have babies. I mean, this is going to be a competitive advantage of the future, but if you're not able to do that because we don't really want to mess with women's rights and through population control policies, at least make sure your people are healthy, well-fed, and again, hesitate to use the word educated, but well-skilled and equipped to take advantage of the future. And then of course you have to make sure that you are selling and offering confidence, and that of course means making sure that people perceive your country as being credible, as being honest, as being a good global partner to grow with alongside. And that's certainly a challenge my country is grappling with. If other countries can get that better, they're going to be at a huge competitive advantage. Confidence that you're going to get those things right going forward.